in making sure that the public is protected from this sort of fraud, they started buckling down. And I even sent you a link, Phil, that shows where they have busted pharmacies in Mississippi, Louisiana, Tennessee, and Florida. I know of a couple that aren't on there that got busted in Arkansas. And they are really starting to crack down on these to protect consumers so that they don't have to deal with this kind of thing.
And what I'll do for the listeners, I'll put a link to this in the show notes. So if you go to the original Spreaker page or the blog for the show, you can find that and read that yourself. And what I want to do is take a quick commercial break and then come back and talk about some of the consumer pricing of drugs and prescriptions. If you can hang on with me for a minute, we'll take that quick break and be right back. This is Phil Ferguson with Polaris Financial Planning, the home of science-based investing. I see people owning really bad investments all of the time. Many advisors are paid a commission by a big company to sell you something you may not need. It's kind of like church. They create fear, then they tell you what you want to hear, and then they take your money. What you want is an advisor that is paid only by you. That is a fee-only fiduciary advisor. Remember, people work for who they are paid by. You can contact me, Phil, at PolarisFinancialPlanning.com, or listen to the cleverly titled The Phil Ferguson Show. Each show, we have an interesting investing skeptically topic and an interview with someone fighting to end religion. Polaris also gives 10% of gross revenue to support the growing secular movement. You're not just getting better investments, you're helping to change the world. All right, everybody, welcome back. This is Phil Ferguson. You are still listening to the cleverly titled Phil Ferguson Show. I have with me Don Ford, who's been involved in compounding pharmacies and related industries and knows quite a bit about drugs and how things work. And I was thinking about the pricing of drugs, and I once had a situation with my dad many years ago. He went to the hospital for a day, and at some point they gave him 2 Tylenol pills, and it was like $95 on the itemized bill, $95 for these 2 Tylenol. And he called the insurance provider and said, "Are you going to pay $95? I mean, this is what drives up the medical costs, that I have to pay $95, or you have to pay $95 for these 2 Tylenol tablets. I mean, I can buy a 500 count bottle for $5 generic. Why would you pay $95 for 2 tablets?" And the person on the other end of the phone with the insurance company says, "Sir, are you officially denying that you received this treatment?" And he goes, "What?" And they go, "Because if you tell us that you didn't receive these tablets, we won't pay for them. And if the hospital insists that they did, it would be between you and them to pay it." He goes, No, I don't want to pay $95. I don't think you should pay $95 either." And they said, "That's not our concern. That's what the bill is. We pay it." What do you think? What do you have thoughts on that?
That is a case where we have actually applied some kind of socialist back end to a capitalist system. And that is to say that the hospital is recouping costs from people who don't have private insurance and who come to the emergency room by spreading the cost for all of their services they provide to people that actually do have insurance. And because the hospital is allowed to set the price in that instance, because there's no real, as you and I already stated, there's no real law that says this is what an aspirin costs, period, then the hospital is allowed to say, well, it was an emergency situation and it was a service that we provided. The cost of the service is what's applied to the aspirin, not the aspirin itself. So they are recouping costs from people who don't have insurance that use the ER, and your insurer is paying for it, paying for the service of having that available, because it's basically socializing the price for everybody else.
And so it's one of those things when I hear people talking about socialized medicine or single-payer medicine, they say, "I don't want to pay for other people that don't have insurance." You already are.
You already are. don't know why you're arguing. You're paying for it with your premiums. You're paying with it for increased copays. You're paying for it whenever you go to the ER. You're paying for it whenever you have a procedure. You're already paying for it.
Well, it's one of the
You're
things.
just doing it. Yeah, you're just doing it below table instead of above.
That's one of the things. Every once in a while, I'll have a client or a prospective client that talks about their current financial advisor, and they say something like, "Well, my guy does it for free." I'm like, "Really? Did you say that out loud? Do you actually believe that to be true? That they do work for you for free? You just don't know what it costs." And so, these corporations, when they donate services to people that can't pay their bills, they're not just giving up profits. The money comes from somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
it comes from you. Another thing that I've seen in all my years of auditing pharmacies, if you have a branded drug means like Viagra or something that has a fancy name to it. They're the only one that can make it by law for a certain period of time. But generic companies have a motivation to fight those patents and to try to get them to end sooner than what the manufacturer would like. And they come out with what's called a generic. And there's a little rule that incentivizes generic manufacturers to do this, and that if you are the company that wins a lawsuit and you're the first to market generic, you get a 6-month window of exclusivity where no one else can make the generic other than you. So if the brand drug costs $200, you can come out with the generic. You're the only generic. All you have to do is compete with the brand price that's at $200, so you come out at $150. Now, what's interesting, and most people don't know this, when the generic comes out at $150, what the brand manufacturer does is increases their price to $400. And when I tell that to people, they're like, well, that doesn't make any sense at all. Well, it does, because if you're shopping based on price, you will always buy the generic. If you don't give a fuck about price and you really want the brand for whatever reason, you're going to buy the brand, and those people don't care about price or don't know about the price, and the insurance company pays it, and the brand goes up. And the generic will stay at $150 until a second manufacturer comes online. Usually the earliest is 6 months, but sometimes it takes longer because no one else is up to speed and able to manufacture, because sometimes you have to kind of create the components or get them, or find a supplier somewhere else in the world that has the raw ingredients, which can be challenging. And the generic price goes from $150 to $120 to $80 to $15, and then all of a sudden you're buying a 100-count bottle, at least the pharmacy is, for $3.75, and if you're buying it for $3.75, it had to cost about that to make a year ago when it was being sold for $150.
The challenge for compounding pharmacy in particular, that's what I'm most familiar with, the price for the labor and the time it took to produce, because the raw materials are set. Now, in order to keep those costs stable, and to prevent things like the crackdowns in all those doctor-run pharmacies, there have been these agencies that have started to come up that keep tabs on the market of how much these individual ingredients cost and relay that information to your insurance companies and your pharmacy benefits managers so that they can tell you, okay, this is how much these ingredients cost now. If you're charged above this amount, I would refuse to pay it. But because the compounding pharmacy can set the price since they're the ones manufacturing, it's now between the company that's telling your insurance how much it should cost and the compounding pharmacy. And so that's a new check and balance that's actually been instituted in that arena. But as far as mass drug producers, I don't know that there's anything in the arena that's like that yet.
Well, I do know that when I was doing the auditing, and it's been many years now, but when I was doing it, the pharmacies did have access to this government agency's published pricing of what it might be reasonable to sell something at retail, and I think they would set something at 250 to 300% above what they estimated was the cost to manufacture, so that the manufacturer still had plenty of room to make profit. So they had that kind of thing available, but it's also one of those things that you go in to buy a prescription drug. I'll just use a generic as an example. It might cost the retailer $4 to buy a 100-count bottle. They give you 30 pills, and they say the cost of the prescription is $72. You pay your $10 copay, and then the insurance company pays an extra $12, and they get $22, even though the price was something wildly different. My wife just recently, this is not drug-related, but medical-related, went in for a couple of tests and procedures, and we just got the bill, and the total cost of all the things that they did over a period of 2 or 3 hours allegedly was $20,000. The insurance company paid about $5,000 of that, and about $14,500 was a cost adjustment down to the contracted rate. And then so at the end, I had to pay $500, which I was very happy that it was only $500. But why even have a $20,000 price just to adjust it down to $5,500? That it's crazy. That
goes back to that whole, there's no set price for those procedures at a hospital. There's no government agency that regulates how much a hospital can charge for those procedures or for those things being done. So what they end up doing is they end up basically setting a super high bar that they figure nobody will pay, and then it goes to your insurer, and your insurer has more experience, I guess, with pricing this sort of thing than even the hospital does. So when the insurer makes a counteroffer, as long as the hospital's still making profit, they'll probably take it. Well, and of course, when they take it, everybody's happy. The hospital's made a profit. The insurance company has paid less than what they were told they were going to have to pay, and you pay less than what you were going to have to pay, even though there really wasn't a price to start with.
Well, of course, the weird thing, though, is that this creates this. I mean, you're required to have a middleman, the insurance company, because if the hospital could have just charged me a reasonable price, or if I knew a reasonable price in advance, I could just get some insurance that would only cover me in extreme cases, where I'm out literally 20, 50, 100,000 or 500,000, and I could go shop and say, here's the procedures I want. What are your prices? Give me your price list. Just like I might shop tires or a car battery. I don't really think I can. I mean, I guess I could. I've never really done it. And go shop these prices and call up and say, how much is this going to cost?
You theoretically could, although a hospital's more likely to negotiate and do that kind of and talk that kind of business shop with your insurance rather than you. But if you were in a country like the UK, there is a government agency that pre-buys and pre-negotiates all the prices of all this, even down to surgical equipment, even down to medicines, anything like that, anything that could go on in a medical facility is pre-negotiated so that when patients on insurance walk in, they know exactly what they're going to expect to pay.
I like the sound of that. Well, Don, we're getting long in our time that I wanted to do for this segment, and I'm sure the listeners are already swimming with all this new information. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to get in one more topic?
No, I think that was everything.
Great. Well, Don, thank you so much for your time, and appreciate the information, and I'm sure the listeners will love it as well. So thank you for coming on the Phil Ferguson Show.
Well, thank you for having me, Phil. It was my pleasure.
Only on Secular Media Network.
It looks like, once again, my show is a little longer than I want. I'd like to keep it around, or maybe even under an hour, 45, 50 minutes on the short side. But here we are going too long, so let me just jump to this last little thing I want to do. I've been mentioning that I'm going to have a speaking tour in California, mostly Southern California. And I've mentioned some of the locations and times. I want to be a little more specific in case you happen to be in California and